Ad revenue is strong in certain quarters, even as some of the economic signals in the US start to show signs of stress. Reporting is getting a little bit murkier in some cases, and search is no longer just a box, it's a behavior happening everywhere, including in AI environments. Here's what the latest signals mean for advertisers. You're listening to the Media Intelligence Podcast from WPP Media. I'm Kate Scott Dawkins, joined by Jeff Foster and Nidhi Shah from the Business Intelligence team. And we have some very special guests this week, Caitlin Taylor and Teddy Cowell from our search practice. So we're going to welcome them in a bit. But first, we're going to do a quick run through of some of the earnings signal from this week. We're also going to talk about the advertising intelligence framework that we introduced fully yesterday. So we're recording this on Friday the 20th. So lots to get through, but just to touch on a few of the reporters that we heard from over the last couple of weeks. Let's actually start with Roku.
Yeah, so Roku had, I would say, pretty solid earnings. Their total net revenue was $4.7 billion, up 15% year over year. Thought a few other interesting highlights from the call. Streaming hours were 145.6 billion, also up 15% year over year. And platform revenue, which includes advertising, was up 18% year over year to 1.2 billion with a gross margin of 52.8%. So a very healthy margin. Of course, that's not all advertising. That includes some of their operating system and licensing deals as well. And they also pointed out how they're approaching 100 million streaming households. So overall, pretty solid. You listen on the earnings call, they did mention a lot about small and medium-sized businesses trying to attract that for their advertising product. A lot of talk about their AI getting incorporated into their advertising products to help attract more of those small and medium-sized businesses. So overall, it sounded pretty good.
We're going to come back to this when we start talking about the advertising intelligence framework, because I think one of the key points for Roku is that they own the operating system of that television. And so they can really control a bit more in terms of what content they are surfacing for people, where advertising gets placed, different advertising formats and innovation on the TV screen in the living room. So I think that's one of the most interesting pieces to watch there. Now, one of the big things we've seen within streaming TV is the connection to retail media, right? Retail media networks. So that pivots us very nicely. We had a bunch of earnings this week from folks in that sector. Nidhi, do you want to give us the high-level overview?
Yeah, I mean, still seeing that robust advertising revenue growth in commerce space in general, particularly through retail media. And when we're also hearing, AI, how it's transforming the sector, providing, kind of benefits in terms of costs, but also a lot of open discussions about agentic commerce. I focus on eBay and Walmart, who disclose their advertising revenue figures. eBay reached nearly 2 billion in advertising revenue, and Walmart was around 6.4 billion in advertising revenue, putting that growth of 46% year on year and making it the 19th largest media owner. And our initial estimates of 6.3 billion were not far from it. So I think we can give ourselves a pat on the back.
Into that top 20, yeah.
Yeah, so the top 20. It goes back to what we've been talking about, right? That we're seeing that top list of media owners really change, with more commerce players entering as media owners and not just as retailers in the advertising space. So really kind of confirming that trend. Another kind of key theme that's been emerging everywhere really is AI as well. Walmart mentioned about their Sparky and the AI-powered conversational shopping assistant, which drove around 35% higher average order values, which I thought was interesting, and really nearly half of their app users using the platform and engaging with it. So we're really seeing, players such as eBay and Walmart, emphasizing on building those proprietary AI capabilities, but also being open to selectively partnering with platforms such as OpenAI and Google, viewing these as channel partners and not necessarily all as threats.
Yeah, that one's interesting. I mean, Walmart definitely big enough to be able to invest in its own AI, platforms and deep integration with its inventory and e-commerce globally. Some of those other players you mentioned, a little bit smaller, eBay, I think Etsy reported this week as well. We'll see, how those partnerships with the AI owners go. Pinterest was also a recent reporter. They had revenue growth of 13% for the quarter and 15% for the year in constant currency terms. US revenue growth lagged that a bit, just 11.5% year over year. And really for that one, I've been watching, I think everyone has been watching in sort of the analyst community, US and Canada user growth. That was just 4%, with most of the user growth coming from rest of world. Now, they are doing a better job of monetizing that rest of world segment, but I think some of that is still via ad sales partnerships. So that's going to be one to watch ongoing as well. We have a couple more to do here. Let's do travel media networks first, since we're sort of on that vein of the world of commerce.
Yes, I mean, again, similar interesting story that global travel has been very strong, especially post the pandemic, and that trend continues. But we're really seeing advertising revenue diverge and really demonstrating how different businesses and different business models are weathering AI evolution in different ways. We've had Bookings and Expedia, which are primarily transactional platforms, meaning, for example, hotels pay for those performance-based supply ads integrated into the bookings flow, and they saw their advert revenues actually grow over that 1 billion mark in 2025. But if you contrast that with someone like TripAdvisor, their advertising revenue declined to about 132 million in 2025, and the management reported that was primarily due to web traffic and the fall in that space. So really them operating as that kind of meta search, reviews, and monetizing traffic through referrals, for example, and display ads to players ironically such as Bookings and Expedia. It's probably likely more hit by things such as Google AI overviews taking place, right? Answering those research queries directly, reducing those crucial click-throughs, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, having control over distribution and having scale in the world of intelligence is just crucial going forward.
Absolutely. And we're also hearing and seeing kind of that AI adoption in travel is accelerating, right? In the UK, for example, the APTA reports how many people are using AI for travel, that figure being around 8%, double of last year. Now, that might be small compared to markets such as the US, but still growing. And it's really about the critical factor where AI sits. So, it sits in that purchase funnel. And, while platforms such as ChatGPT integrate apps from, TripAdvisor, Expedia, and Bookings, they can't finalize those bookings, and users are still having to navigate to someone like Bookings or Expedia to complete those transactions.
For now.
For now. That might change, but the management remained, optimistic about this kind of AI space.
Well, let's move on very quickly to Reddit. Has been one of the standout stars in terms of growth recently. Advertising revenue was up 75% in the fourth quarter, up 74% for the year. Pretty big numbers, still off a smaller base than a lot of these other digital players, but certainly seeing a lot of investment. Some of that, I think, being helped by how frequently they show up in these reports about citations from AI agents. And so that being a trusted source where some of these large language models are going to understand, real human reviews and feelings about things. They did see DAU, or daily active users, growth slowing a little bit. 19% year over year at the end of 2025 versus 39% the year prior. And they talked about opportunities for international expansion, with 90% of the posts still being in English, a lot of growth coming from overseas markets or national markets. So look to see that increase in the coming year. And one of the things that I've been following has been plugged in user growth, right? Again, when we get into the advertising intelligence framework, one of the things we look at is how much about their users can these platforms understand and then apply to being able to connect brands with audiences at the right time and in the right context. So they actually said in their 10K that they're going to stop reporting logged in versus logged out in the third quarter of this year. Just reminded me of, Netflix stopping reporting on their membership numbers, Disney giving us a lot less detail in terms of their media numbers. Jeff, what do we think? Is this important for advertisers? Should they care about these kinds of metrics? Are we tipping too far into, for these companies, pricing growth versus volume growth, which is, interesting because it's been CPG has been dealing with for the last 2 years. What do you think?
Yeah, I know. It's an interesting one. I was thinking about it, especially with Reddit being a little bit of a different animal than like a Netflix or a Disney Plus. Obviously, the more information you have on logged in users, probably the better for advertisers. But I think Reddit's an interesting case because if you're searching on Reddit, you're already searching for probably something or getting led to Reddit via an AI platform is probably going to be for something pretty specific anyways, rather than like a general entertainment like a Netflix or a Disney Plus. So in theory, if you're searching for whatever it is, clothing or, something about the auto industry, you probably have a pretty good idea of what your interest is versus a, more of a general entertainment platform. But yeah, I don't know. I could see it going either way, but I will say, I think Reddit's a bit more of an outlier as far as that goes for logged in users.
I think it pushes them into maintaining that reactive position, right, in advertising, whereas we're saying the future is likely to be more proactive, right? Predictive. And so that's where I see some of the issue. Maybe if you are only seeing what they need when they come to your site that time, and you can't connect that to any other information that might help you offer more valuable suggestions to them, that is where I see that breaking down a little bit. But we'll see. We'll see as we go through this year what those numbers look like, and things can always change.
Yeah. And I will say, purely anecdotal, but I do notice almost every time I use an AI platform, I do get referrals or sourcing from Reddit. So
Yeah.
I will say it's popping up pretty frequently.
Yeah. Well, speaking of search, we are going to do a fun deep dive segment with a couple of my favorite people from across WPP. We have Caitlin Taylor, who is Global Head of Search at WPP Media, and Teddy Cowell, who is Global VP of SEO and GSO at WPP Media. And we're going to be talking to them about basically the future of search and how they're seeing this current phase of growth and evolution. Well, I am so pleased that you're joining us today, Caitlin and Teddy. Thank you so much. Welcome to the pod.
Thanks so much for having us. This is
Yeah, thank you.
exciting.
So in our December advertising forecast, we made what might have been considered at the time a bit of a contrarian call, which is that search advertising is still in very good health. It's expected to grow double digits globally in 2026. And fast forward to the fourth quarter results for Google and Microsoft, and that expectation is definitely bearing out. Microsoft reported 9% constant currency growth for their search and news revenue ex traffic acquisition costs, and Google's search and other ad revenue growth accelerated to 17% for the quarter. So we see this as a very dynamic channel in an environment where we have new players like OpenAI entering the AI search arena, continued innovation from Google as the largest incumbent, including advertising and AI overviews. How are you coping with that level of dynamism, right? It must feel incredibly exciting but also very fast paced from within this world.
On the paid side, we're used to things changing really regularly, and established players like Google have always been really good about rolling out new features and formats on a regular basis. So it feels like business as usual, but just a little faster pace with them. Whereas some of these new players, the Perplexities, the OpenAIs of the world, it's like the wild, wild west out there. We're rolling out pilots just exceptionally quickly and with limited kind of background infrastructure, with a goal of just getting out there, testing and learning. So it's kind of back to the old days.
It's like the early .com days again. There's a lot of innovation coming out from Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, all across the landscape. And you can see that not only in how the LLMs and the models are evolving themselves, but also in the infrastructure that's being put out that's really going to underpin the future of the web as we know it. So particularly around the agentic and the commerce space and the new protocols that are coming out. So the Anthropic's model context protocol's been around for a while. It's pretty well established. On the commerce side, we're seeing rafts of new protocols coming out that will enable the future of agentic commerce, from AP2, Agentic Commerce Protocol, UCP, and then even like last week, Web MCP from Google was designed to make websites, like the standard web websites, more accessible to agents. So there's a huge amount of innovation that's happening, and it's a lot to keep up with and a lot to try on.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about agents interacting on websites and then also brands wanting to make sure that they are still discoverable in this space, it seems like it's pulling the relationship between paid search and organic search and owned pages elsewhere, social and everything else, more closely together. How does that evolve your work and the overlap between traditional search and then answer engines, zero-click search, agents? What does that collaboration look like now across our teams internally and with clients too?
Yeah, I think that we have always taken kind of a collaborative integrated search approach, right? It's one search page, and from the consumer point of view, it's one perspective. So organic and paid have always been intrinsically linked, but this new world requires so much in-depth collaboration between not just social and programmatic and media buying, where these ad formats kind of get fuzzy and overlap, but with our digital PR and performance content partners, with production, with all the other kind of groups that deliver messages out and work with those partners and partnerships affiliates. It's become the requirement to deliver on excellence. And that's why we call it total search at WPP Media. It's not just traditional pure play search anymore.
That's 100% right. So it's always, this integration's always been part of, I'd say, organic best practice, but the increased focus on AI and LLMs, and particularly because they're sourcing a lot of content from third-party sources, it's really brought that back to the fore again. Across our teams, we're testing and evaluating all the ways that we can improve visibility. Like Kate was saying, how do you join the channels together? So for instance, working with an FMCG challenger pet food brand where we're integrating LLM analysis, their affiliate activity and digital PR, and how we make that work together to improve their visibility. So, we've seen some massive growth for that brand, for example.
Yeah, it's changing how we think about things as we're forecasting too. We've traditionally reported on traditional search, right? Like the pure play search folks like Naver and Seznam in Czech Republic. People forget about that one. Search engine. Google, obviously, Bing. Our December forecast was the first time where we really put in an effort to say, well, if we said total search, what does that size look like for 2020? So if we included the element of commerce that is search and the element of social that is search, and you go from a search world that is 270 billion to a search world that is more than 400 billion. So that gives people, I think our listeners, a sense of the scale of how much more you can be talking about when you add all of those other elements in. So yeah, that's a big piece of the pie for you guys to all be trying to get to grips with. What's one myth you'd like to debunk, or something that's been oversimplified in the press and the coverage of what's happening? I think one of the things I've been talking a lot about is what impact the entrance of OpenAI is going to have, and trying to help set that in context for clients and reporters and everyone else, right? Because it's new, but it's also a continuation of the kinds of things that other players like Google have been doing for quite some time, and where we're seeing innovation, and just how long it takes new entrants into advertising to scale up, like we saw with Netflix some time ago. So, of all the things that we've sort of been hearing in the marketplace, what's something that you think needs added context, I guess? What do you say?
I mean, if I were to pick just one thing, and there's a lot going on out there, I think sometimes in some of these narratives, there's this like forced false dichotomy between pure play and AI search. That if AI discovery is growing, then it means that pure play search must be declining, or people must be moving away, dollars must be moving away. And in actual fact, what we've seen from both both investment and from consumer behavior is that the pie is growing much faster than it is fragmenting. So even though people are moving to AI-based discovery in places like ChatGPT, we know that those people actually search more on Google than they did before they started using ChatGPT. There's just more search behavior happening in the ecosystem as there are more places where people feel like they're getting really interesting and helpful answers. And so I think that this like false zero-sum game of one must win so the other loses is not realistic in terms of the way that the dollars are panning out and the way that attention is panning out.
Right.
Yeah. And sort of similar to that, I'd say even though ChatGPT has become synonymous with AI-based discovery, like don't overlook Google. So similar to what you've done with your future advertising framework, Kate. When you look at the stats available and consider the range of AI-based chat experiences that Google has, from AI overviews to AI mode to Gemini, plus all the other fantastic forms of search like image search, etc., hugely AI powered, their share of these consumer-based AI experiences is much, much bigger than people are really realizing and recognizing. And also with the Apple Siri deal, like that's a game changer, right? So I'd say fundamentally don't overlook Google and think it's just about ChatGPT.
Yeah. Well, let's stick on Google because they have been a loud voice in this space as well. They've been emphasizing concept of EEAT, so experience, expertise, authority, trust. And you mentioned, working with PR teams and clients, right? This is an expanded world of how clients are trying to and how brands are trying to become source worthy for AI. What does that look like if you were talking to a CMO today, the couple of things that they really had to keep in mind or try to do first in that world?
So EEAT, or what was originally EAT, is a content assessment rubric that comes from Google's quality rater program, where they have thousands of people behind the scenes checking and scoring content in search results relative to the queries, like does it deserve to be there, is it good, trustworthy or not, and it's fed back into the algorithm to help them improve the search experience. So it's absolutely fantastic and pretty sound principle, but in practice what that means is you're trying to prove real world experience, demonstratable expertise, trusted authority, and to do that consistently. So that's also important for AI systems, right, where we've got to get the brands and your brands seen as reliable sources, not just on your own website, but across like many third-party websites as well. So that means, publishing content that's grounded in like real use, real insights. It's not just recycled advice. That means assessing and thinking about your third-party sites and signals, like where are you getting your mentions, etc. How are you leveraging digital PR to appear in the right places? Like ensuring that's really consistent, and how your brand is represented is shown up and is consistent.
Interesting. I mean, that's so important too, as we've seen the advertising world shift increasingly to influencers and those kinds of user-generated platforms, review sites, creators. It's just become such a big piece of that for brands to navigate, and a real expansion of the number of touch points they have for those types of external reviews and commentary as well.
Exactly. You see like a real resurgence, particularly in organic social and user-generated content that kind of, we all know fell out of favor for many years, but now it's really critical because it's providing the type of real human-based discussion and information that people want, and that's real fuel for the large language models.
Are there client categories? I mean, because we work with a lot of different types of businesses, are there client categories that are finding it easier to transition into this new world just on the basis of their current content assets or where they advertise? Are there categories where AI mediated search is more disruptive? I mean, I think content companies and places that were reliant on having traffic to their websites probably is one. What advice are you giving to especially those clients in sort of the more disrupted categories? And what do you think those are, I guess?
You make an interesting point around publishers and kind of content-based sites being critically hit by this. But I think that it speaks to any business that either actually gets its value from traffic to their site or any business that thinks the value or measures the value as being traffic to their website. So
Interesting.
I think there are some marketers who are still being evaluated on and still measuring things like site traffic, clicks, share of voice, these kind of legacy media metrics that don't actually pay their bills. So separate from the content and the publishers, thinking about advertisers in most of the verticals that we service, if they are really have a great view of what value looks like to them and how they can measure that on the web beyond media metrics, something that ties to revenue, incremental sales, they have strong MMMs or multi-touch attribution setups. Those are the marketers that seem like they're able to move in an agile enough way to keep up with the speed that is this new era of the internet, because it's easier to evaluate new technologies, new kind of placements, new ways of working if you have this solid core of data and value measurement. Whereas we find that if clients are kind of in this legacy media metric world, they kind of get hamstrung by that measurement rather than propelled by that measurement. So that's not a vertical answer for you or a segment answer, but I think it kind of delineates the clients that we see are most excited about and taking most advantage of this future versus the ones for whom this is causing the most distress or kind of challenge in their business operations right now.
Look, I love that answer because it's all about the money and follow the data. So that's the best kind of answer for our world too. I think that's what we always try to do when we're looking at our analyses. So I'm going to end on that note. I love it. Thank you both so much for joining us and bringing your expertise on this to our listeners. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. This has been a pleasure.
Well, I thought that was great. I learn so much every time I talk to the two of them. It's really been interesting to, I think, sit in a company like WPP Media at this time when there is so much happening, so much growth, so much change, and really being on that forefront of helping our clients decode basically where the current state is and where the future state is. And that future state is a great segue into our last segment today, which is all about the advertising intelligence framework that we've launched yesterday. We did a preview in our December forecast, but this is really about looking forward and really trying to understand and help our clients understand how to better prepare for and sort of succeed in the next shift of the advertising world and media world, where it is so driven by AI and intelligence. Otherwise, you think about the last sort of 20 years being this big shift from primarily advertising happening within media companies to now really being dominated by services companies that are doing more across communications and entertainment and commerce and everything else. When we add this intelligence layer of where people are finding information, how intelligence is being connected across not just, a search browser, but also your smart home or your smart auto, potentially new surfaces like glasses. We really wanted to understand how intelligence was going to function in this new world, what companies that we currently see in the advertising space were well placed to succeed, and what capabilities it was going to take in order to do intelligence well in the AI era. So you can find out more at our website. We'll put the link in the show notes. Really, the advertising intelligence framework is hopefully a language for our industry to use. It looks at 5 pillars of capabilities. The first is the input layer. It is the data assets. This is not just about cookies. We're really looking about, what companies can understand about their audiences and what would delight them in terms of predictions and recommendations. So, tying that across commerce and content, location, behavior. And once you have those data insights, are you able to process them into intelligence? So that is the AI and technical capability pillar. This is really the processing layer. Who has the chips? Who has the models? We're seeing a really interesting divide here between the companies we assess that are sort of building the brains, like OpenAI and Google, and those that are renting them, right, or using the models from others. Then we look at distribution, and this is the access layer. So who has large audiences and user bases around the world internationally? Is it market dependent? Do you own hardware at a device level and an operating system level where you can manage those brand messages better and more completely yourself? Then we have how well these companies are able to monetize all of this intelligence, mostly with advertisers, because that is our core focus is really not, artificial intelligence or content for its own sake, but how these things enable better advertising, right? Better advertising for brands, better advertising for consumers, ideally. So within monetization, we're looking at things like commerce infrastructure. Do they see the entire purchase journey from discovery all the way through to purchase? Is it at the SKU level or not? We're looking at their network of advertiser customers. What do they have in terms of their advertising offerings? And then the last piece is content and media. So you have an understanding about your audience, you have the intelligence and models to translate that into data, you have advertiser relationships to, help monetize that and create these brand messages. And then, ideally you want people to be spending time with you so that you can deliver these messages. And that's where content and media comes in. We believe it is still one of the best ways to ensure that you have that inventory to create advertising, again, for audiences and brands. We look at things like IP and ecosystem lock-in and whether the content of these companies is part of the sort of cultural zeitgeist or conversation. A company like TikTok, ByteDance, and X scores well there, or whether you have good IP, someone like an Amazon Prime Video, which has their own long form content, scores well in that metric. So we've tried to be as granular and rigorous in terms of this assessment. The idea is to do this rescoring once a quarter, which is probably still not fast enough in terms of the pace of AI announcements, but I think it does give a good update. So just between November's assessment that we put into the this year, next year forecast and February's, which is what we released yesterday, we had things like SpaceX buying XAI, right? Which changes the makeup of that company and how we think about them existing in this world and the pieces that they can pull together. It's been some of the most interesting work I've done, I think, in my career in the last several years at WPP. So very, very exciting. We'll put the link in to read more. We'll continue to talk about it on this podcast because one of the most useful things I've found so far is that it really helps you to understand the moves that are happening in the marketplace and predict those things. We scored 12 companies initially. So those are, let's see if I can get them all. Alphabet, Amazon, Tencent, ByteDance, Meta, Microsoft, Apple, OpenAI, SpaceX, XAI, Xiaomi, Samsung, and Alibaba. So that was a bit of a long-winded explanation. It's a lot of information to get across in a podcast, but do go to the website and check it out. Nidhi, Jeff, anything you want to add to that sort of overview plug?
I think it's just really interesting, this future of advertising, how many different points that you can touch a consumer is always going to be increasingly valuable. So as you mentioned, Kate, whether that's hardware or content and media, how you can differentiate between the different ad sellers and the kind of properties that they own is really interesting. And it's been a great exercise to be a part of.
Yeah, I agree. It's been fascinating to see it, especially like at this level of detail. And it really does get you thinking of, like you said, identifying those gaps, especially on the content, on the hardware, on the commerce side, and just kind of seeing how this big ecosystem works and kind of thinking about the trends of more consolidation amongst the big players, always having that in the back of your mind, and just sort of seeing the companies that can afford this level of building out the infrastructure.
It's also really interesting. It helps you kind of distill conversations that are happening in the marketplace and whether you agree or not. And it gives you a grounding for that, right? So when we're talking about Apple's choice to be not necessarily on the forefront of model building using now Gemini within Siri, but they have their own infrastructure. They have a huge distribution sort of moat in terms of their hardware and integration of software and hardware. And so you look at how defensible is that versus someone else's strategy. Distribution definitely came up as one of the, I think, hardest things to overcome as a gap, right? Because selling an actual physical hardware is a difficult problem. It's a little bit harder than just buying another digital service and bolting that on to what you already have. So it's been interesting to look at the different strengths and what feels more durable. And those are the conversations we're having with clients now, right? In terms of have a look at your partners. We can use this framework to help you understand the kinds of questions you should be asking them about their roadmaps for the future, right? Identifying those gaps and having conversations about what the partner plans for innovation are. And then also assessing within our clients, are they ready to interact with these companies on these different levels? What do they need to build internally to be able to take advantage of the intelligence that's going to be available coming forward? But yeah, we've already running long today. So if you've stuck with us this far, thank you. We have more coming next week, including Warner Brothers, Paramount, some of the US local players like Nexstar and Gray. Anything fun to end the episode on? Things people are watching or listening to?
Well, of course, we have the Olympics getting closer to ending, so that'll be fun. I know we have got some good hockey going on, some other fun events.
I've been following the cricket T20 World Cup, so looking forward to some matches there.
Excellent. All sports all the time. Yes, love it. Lots of Olympics watching in our household, plus Six Nations rugby, which has also been fantastic. The earnings has felt really drawn out this time. So looking forward to sort of coming off the bulk of that and into the spring months and hopefully a little bit less rain here on the West Coast, although rain's always a good thing out here in California. All right. Well, thank you guys. We will catch up next week. As always, thank you for listening to the WPP Media Intelligence Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you have any questions for the show, you can email us at business.intelligence@wppmedia.com. Now, remember, the Media Intelligence Podcast from WPP is meant for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered financial advice.